Forgery is a felony, but what happens when the forger shares your bed, your home, your life? For one man, the discovery began with a simple piece of paper, a loan application with his signature, perfect in every detail, except he'd never seen it before. The amount would break him, and by a twist of fate so cruel it felt like a joke, the only person who could prove it was the estranged brother he hadn't spoken to in 15 years. His name is Robert Vance, a history teacher, a few years from a quiet retirement in the same suburban home he'd shared with his wife, Claire, for 22 years. The loan was for $380,000. The bank was First Mercantile Trust, and the brother who flagged it, Michael Vance, Senior Vice President of Loan Compliance, a man Robert hadn't called or texted since their father's funeral. This is the story of a crime discovered by the one person who could never walk away from it, and the desperate reunion that would force two brothers to question everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and the woman caught between them. For Robert Vance, the unraveling began not with a knock on the door or a phone call, but with silence. Specifically, the silence of his wife, Claire, for the entire first week of November. She became a ghost in their own home, up before dawn, out until long after his evening gradding was done, offering only clipped answers about errands and appointments. The Claire he'd known for 22 years was a talker. She filled spaces. This new, quiet version of her left a void, and into that void rushed a cold, formless dread he couldn't name. He almost asked a dozen times, over coffee as she stared blankly at her phone, in bed as she lay stiffly with her back to him. But 22 years teaches you the geometry of another person's pain, and everything about Claire's posture said, do not approach. So he didn't. He taught his classes on the Civil War, came home, made dinner for one, and waited for whatever storm was gathering inside her to break. The first crack appeared on November 8th. Robert was balancing the checkbook, a ritual he performed on the 15th and 30th of every month without fail. He noticed a discrepancy, a $47 charge from a pharmacy they didn't use. He mentioned it offhand that night. Claire froze in the middle of loading the dishwasher. Her knuckles went white on a dinner plate. It's mine, she said, her voice too sharp. A prescription. I didn't want to worry you. Before he could ask what prescription, she was already walking away, the subject closed with a finality that felt like a slammed door. Here's something they don't tell you about long marriages. You don't need to hear the lie to know it's there. You feel it in the atmosphere. The air in their house, which had always been warm and lightly scented with her vanilla candle, now felt thin, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Then, on the morning of November 12th, the letter arrived. It wasn't a dramatic, thick, cream-colored envelope. It was a standard First Mercantile Trust statement addressed to both Robert and Claire Vance. Robert almost recycled it with the junk mail, but something, maybe that same whispering dread, made him open it. And there it was, page 2, transaction summary, a disbursement of $380,000 dated November 5th into a joint account he had never authorized. The loan type, home equity line of credit, the property listed, their home. His first thought was impossible. Their mortgage was nearly paid off. They discussed tapping the equity once, years ago, for a kitchen renovation, but they'd decided against it. They had no need for that kind of money. His second thought was mistake, a bank error. He'd call, get it straightened out. He reached for the phone, then stopped. His eyes tracked back up to the top of the statement, to the account number, to the names. Robert Vance, Claire Vance, and his own signature, reproduced in clean, digital print at the bottom of the application summary page. It was perfect. The same lazy loop on the capital R, the same decisive slash through the Z in Vance he'd used since high school, a flawless replica. The floor didn't drop out, the room didn't spin, the opposite happened. Everything became hyper-focused, crystalline in its clarity, the grain of the kitchen table under his fingertips, the hum of the refrigerator, the exact weight of the paper in his hand. This was the moment the silent dread named itself. This was betrayal, quantified and itemized. He didn't confront her, not yet. Confrontation requires a shared understanding of reality, and he was no longer sure what reality he and Claire inhabited. Instead, he became an investigator in his own life. He logged into their main banking portal. They used the same password, a fact that now felt tragically naive. He found the new joint account. The money had sat for 2 days, then, in 3 rapid transfers on November 7th and 8th, been moved to an external account at a different bank. An account he had no access to, an account in Claire's name only. He sat at his desk, in the study where he graded essays on Gettysburg and Reconstruction, and he did the math. The silence, the pharmacy charge, the transfers, it painted a picture, but one with a hole in the center the size of a motivation. Why? Was it gambling? A secret debt? Another man? Each possibility felt like a different kind of death. He needed legal advice, but the thought of walking into a lawyer's office and saying, "My wife stole from me," made the bile rise in his throat. There had to be another way. He needed to talk to the bank, to someone who could tell him how this happened and what he could do. First Mercantile Trust. The name triggered a memory, old and rusted over. His brother Michael Vance, Senior Vice President of Loan Compliance. He hadn't thought about that title in years, had actively tried to forget it. The estrangement wasn't over one big thing. It was the slow accretion of 1,000 small resentments, different life choices, political arguments, the silent competition for their father's diminished approval that continued long after the man was gone. The last time they'd spoken at the funeral, Michael had said, "You live in a textbook, Robbie. The real world has different rules." Robert had replied, "At least my world has a moral center." They hadn't spoken since. Now his brother was inside the very institution that held the key to his nightmare. It was an impossible ask, to break a 15-year silence with a plea for help over a crime committed by his wife. It was also his only viable move. Every other path led to lawyers, police, and the complete, public annihilation of the life he'd built. On November 14th, Robert Vance dialed his brother's office number. It was a number he still knew by heart, a relic from a time when they were allies. He expected a secretary, a gatekeeper. Michael answered on the second ring. His voice was deeper, wearier than Robert remembered. "Michael Vance." "Michael, it's Robert." The pause that followed was so long Robert thought the connection had failed. "Robert," Michael's voice was flat, stripped of any readable emotion. "This is a surprise. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. It's about a transaction at your bank." Another pause, shorter this time. Then Michael said, "I know." 2 words, and in them, the entire universe shifted. Robert's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean, you know?" "The home equity line of credit on your property for $380,000. It was flagged by my department's automated system last Thursday. High-value disbursement to a new account with immediate outgoing transfers. Standard fraud protocol." "You flagged it." "I reviewed it personally, Robert." Michael's tone changed, became professional, precise. The bank officer speaking now, not the brother. "The application was submitted online on October 28th, supported by digital copies of tax forms, your deed, and a driver's license, and a signature page, your signature." "It's a forgery," Robert said, the words rushing out. "I never signed anything. I didn't know about this until today." "I know that too," Michael said, his voice dropping. "The signature in the file is a digital traceover, a good one, but our software looks for hesitation marks, for the perfect digital smoothness that comes from tracing a scanned image. It flagged it as high-probability forgery. That's why it came to me." Robert's head was swimming, so it stopped. "The money." "The money is gone, Robert. The checks and balances are for approval, not recovery after disbursement. My system flagged it, but by the time it reached my desk for review, the funds had already been released and transferred out. The process is automated. I was the human failsafe, and I failed. I saw the file too late." The admission hung between them, charged with a shared, horrific understanding. Michael had seen the crime in progress from the inside and had been powerless to stop it. "Why are you telling me this?" Robert asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You could have just let the process run, let the collections department come after me in 6 months." "Because it's you," Michael said, and for the first time the professional armor cracked. There was old anger there and something else, reluctant duty. And because when I saw the application, I saw something else. The IP address it was submitted from, it wasn't your home network, Robert. It was submitted from a public library computer 2 towns over. And the security footage from that library, which we requested as part of our internal review, shows Claire alone. On October 28th, at 2:17 in the afternoon. He had the evidence, cold, digital, irrefutable. Michael had it all. What do I do? Robert asked, the full weight of his isolation finally crushing down on him. You meet me, Michael said, tomorrow, not at the bank, somewhere neutral. There are protocols. I've already breached half of them by calling you. What Claire did is bank fraud. It's a federal felony. If I file my report with what I have, the next call you get will be from the FBI, and they won't care that she's your wife. The line crackled with silence. Robert could hear the faint sound of Michael's breathing, the rustle of papers. Where, Robert finally managed. There's a diner on Route 9, the Skyliner. I'll be in a booth in the back at noon. Come alone, Robert, and don't talk to Claire, not yet. The call ended. Robert sat in the deepening dark of his study, the phone still pressed to his ear. His wife was a criminal. His estranged brother was his only lifeline. And $380,000 of debt, signed in his perfect hand, was now hanging over the only home he'd ever loved. Tomorrow at noon, he would walk into a diner and face the brother he'd sworn never to speak to again. And together, they would have to decide the fate of the woman they both, in their own broken ways, had loved. The Skyliner diner smelled of old coffee and bacon grease, a temple of anonymity. Robert spotted Michael immediately in the last booth facing the door. He looked like a man expecting trouble. His brother was older, of course, the silver at his temples more pronounced, his suit expensive but rumpled as if he'd slept in it. He looked up as Robert approached, and for a fleeting second, Robert saw not the bank executive, but the anxious boy who used to check for monsters under his bed. Robert slid into the booth. A waitress materialized. Coffee? She asked. Just coffee, they said in unison, then fell silent, the shared reflex highlighting the chasm between them. Michael spoke first, his voice low. You look like hell. You have the file, Robert said, bypassing any pretense of small talk. Michael nodded, reached into a leather satchel at his side, and placed a thin manila folder on the table between them. He didn't open it. Before you look at this, you need to understand my position. I am obligated by federal regulation and my employment contract to file a suspicious activity report. I have not done that yet. By sitting here with you, I am committing a fireable offense, possibly worse. Why? Robert asked again, the core question of the last 15 years hanging between them. Why risk that for me? Michael leaned back, his eyes weary. Because Dad died thinking I was the pragmatic one and you were the principled one. He was half right. I am pragmatic. And from a purely pragmatic standpoint, letting this become a federal case creates a mess for my bank, a public relations nightmare, and it does nothing to get the money back. It just puts your wife in prison and you in bankruptcy. There is no victory in that outcome for anyone. It was a cold calculus, delivered without sentiment. It was also the first real thing his brother had said to him in a decade and a half. Show me, Robert said. Michael opened the folder. The top sheet was a printout of the loan application. Robert's forged signature stared back at him, a malevolent twin of his own hand. Beneath it were screenshots of the digital audit trail, timestamps, IP address logs, and a grainy black and white still from the public library security camera. It showed Claire, profile view, sitting at a computer terminal, her face illuminated by the screen. The timestamp read 2:17 p.m., October 28th. The date, they were supposed to be at a parent-teacher conference. Robert's breath caught. Seeing it, rendered in the sterile clarity of evidence, made it more real and somehow more surreal. The paper trail is flawless if you don't look too close, Michael said, tapping the signature. She used a high-resolution scan of your signature from last year's joint tax return. She traced it digitally. It's good enough to pass a human review under normal circumstances, but our AI looks for the absence of natural variation, the tiny shakes, the speed changes in a pen's stroke. This has none. It's a perfect copy, and that's what made it imperfect. He flipped to the next page. Bank statements showing the 3 outgoing transfers, $200,000 to an account at Great Plains Federal, $130,000 to another at Liberty Savings, $50,000 to a third institution, a digital-only bank called Viridian Direct. The money's been scattered, Michael said. Like seeds, makes it harder to trace, harder to claw back. She knew what she was doing, or someone told her what to do. What do you mean someone told her? Robert asked, his voice tight. Michael met his gaze. Robbie, people don't just wake up and commit perfect bank fraud. The IP address, the traceover, the rapid transfers to obscure the trail. This isn't a desperate housewife move. This is someone who did research, or who had a guide. The implication landed like a physical blow, an accomplice, a partner. Why? Robert whispered, the question now directed at the ghost in the grainy photograph. What could she possibly need $380,000 for that she couldn't ask me? That, Michael said, closing the folder, is the question you need to answer, and you need to answer it fast, because I can delay my report for 48 hours, maybe 72 if I claim I'm awaiting more documentation from the library. After that, my hands are tied. The system files automatically, and once that SAR is filed with FinCEN, it's out of my hands, the bank's hands, and into the gears of the federal machine. 72 hours, 3 days to unravel a 22-year marriage and a felony. What do I do? Robert asked, feeling the weight of the impossible deadline. You go home, you look for clues, you check your own records for anything you missed, you think about who she's been talking to, and then, Michael said, his expression grim, you confront her before the authorities do. It's your only chance to get a story you can potentially use. A story to use for what? To negotiate, Michael said flatly. If you can get her to admit it, to tell you where the money is, to maybe return some of it voluntarily, that changes the calculus. A prosecutor is less interested in a case where the victim is ambivalent and partial restitution is made. It might keep her out of prison. It might keep you out of financial ruin, but you need the truth first. Robert felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger at Claire, a desperate hope for a reason, and a deep, unsettling gratitude toward the brother he'd written off as lost. Why are you helping me like this? Michael stared into his coffee cup. Because 15 years ago, you told me my world had no moral center. Maybe I'm trying to prove you wrong. Or maybe, he said, looking up, I just remember that she used to make you laugh, really laugh. And whatever this is, that version of her and that version of you deserves a chance to be heard before the sirens start. He slid a business card across the table. It was plain white, with only a phone number handwritten on it. Burner phone. I'll have it on me for the next 72 hours. Call me the moment you know something, anything. Robert took the card, the digits feeling like a lifeline made of spider silk. He drove home in a haze, the folder of evidence on the passenger seat burning a hole in his periphery. The house was dark, empty. Claire was still out. He went straight to her office, a small, tidy room off the living room she used for paying bills and her volunteer work. He started with the desk. He found nothing in the drawers but old tax records, stationery, and knitting patterns. Her computer was password protected. He tried their anniversary, her birthday, the dog's name, no luck. He felt a rising panic. He was an amateur playing against a clock he couldn't see. Then he remembered the pharmacy charge, the $47. He went to the kitchen trash, an act that felt both vile and necessary. He emptied it onto the floor, sifting through coffee grounds and eggshells, and there it was, crumpled into a ball at the very bottom, a receipt from the unfamiliar pharmacy. It wasn't for a prescription. The item listed was a prepaid Visa gift card, $47.50. A gift card, not medicine, a tool for anonymity. He sat back on his heels, his mind racing. The library computer, the prepaid card, likely used to pay for some online service or another layer of obfuscation. This was premeditated, step by step. His eyes landed on the recycling bin, filled with junk mail and catalogs. He appended it. Amidst the credit card offers and charity pleas was a folded, glossy brochure for a place called the Serenity Springs Wellness Center. It looked expensive. He opened it. It was a private treatment facility specializing in trauma and addiction recovery. Located in Arizona, he'd never seen it before. He flipped it over. On the back, in Claire's handwriting, was a series of numbers. They looked like calculations. He squinted. It was a budget. Listed items, program tuition, $175,000. Extended care 6 mo, $95,000. Travel lodging, $25,000. Incidentals medication, $85,000. The total was circled heavily, $380,000. $380,000. The room tilted. This wasn't gambling. This wasn't another man. This was treatment for what? Addiction to what? Claire didn't drink more than a glass of wine. She didn't use drugs. Trauma from what? A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. From about 8 months ago, Claire had been unusually withdrawn for a week. She said she was having bad migraines. One night, he'd woken up to find her side of the bed empty. He'd found her in the living room, sitting in the dark, just staring at the wall. When he asked her what was wrong, she'd just shaken her head and said, "The past doesn't stay buried, Robert. It waits." He'd assumed she was being philosophical, maybe about getting older. He'd made her tea and gone back to bed. The past. He stood up, the brochure trembling in his hand. He needed to know more about this place. He went to his own computer and searched Serenity Springs Wellness Center controversy. The results loaded, and the bottom dropped out of his world. The third result was a news article from the Arizona Sentinel, dated 2 years prior. The headline, "Luxury Rehab Center Investigated for Patient Coercion, Fraudulent Billing." He clicked it. The article detailed lawsuits from families claiming Serenity Springs used high-pressure tactics to admit patients, then inflated costs and pressured them into signing over assets. It mentioned a specific counselor, a man named Dr. Marcus Thorne, who had been accused of manipulating vulnerable patients for financial gain. The article noted Thorne had left Serenity Springs shortly before the investigation went public. His current whereabouts were unknown. Robert's blood ran cold. He searched Marcus Thorne plus Serenity Springs. A single older LinkedIn profile appeared. The photo showed a man in his 50s with a calm, trustworthy smile. The headline, "Certified Trauma and Addiction Specialist." The profile listed no current employer, but listed under skills and endorsements were phrases that now read like sinister clues: crisis intervention, family system financing, patient advocacy. This was the guide. This had to be. Claire hadn't just stolen the money, she had been steered towards stealing it, targeted, preyed upon. The why was no longer a mystery of greed, but a tragedy of vulnerability exploited. His phone buzzed on the desk, a text from Claire, "Running late, dinner with Sarah, don't wait up, Zoe." He stared at the letters, the casual Zoe, the easy lie. Was Sarah even in town? He didn't know anymore. He picked up the burner phone card and dialed Michael's number. It rang once. "Michael." "I found something," Robert said, his voice raw. "It's not what we thought. She's not spending it on herself. I think she's being scammed by a man, a professional. The money is for a rehab center in Arizona that has fraud allegations. I have his name." The line was silent for a beat. "Marcus Thorne," Michael said. Robert's heart stopped. "How did you know that?" "Because I ran the account numbers through a back-channel search," Michael said, his voice grim. "The $50,000 sent to Viridian Direct. It was transferred out the next day to an account registered to an M. Thorne Consulting LLC. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. I didn't want to send you home looking for a monster under the bed if I wasn't sure he was real." "He's real," Robert breathed, "and he has his hooks in my wife." "Then we have a new problem," Michael said, "and a new deadline. If Thorne smells any hint of investigation, he'll disappear with whatever money he has left. And he'll likely convince Claire to disappear with him to avoid prosecution. You need to talk to her, tonight, before she gets any deeper and before my 48 hours are up." "I can't," Robert said, panic rising. "She's not home, she's out. She lied about where she is." "Then find her," Michael said, urgency clipping his words. "Use your phone, the Find My Phone feature. Do you share locations?" They did. It was a family safety thing they'd set up years ago. Robert, with trembling fingers, opened the app on his computer. He located Claire's phone. The pulsing dot wasn't downtown at a restaurant. It was at the airport, the international terminal. "Oh God," Robert whispered. "Where?" Michael demanded. The airport. She's at the airport, Michael. The sound of Michael grabbing his keys came through the phone. I'm 15 minutes from there. Meet me at departures, curbside. Do not approach her alone. If Thorn is with her, this is beyond a family intervention. This is a fugitive situation. The call ended. Robert stood in the silent, violated space of his home, the evidence of his wife's deception and desperation scattered around him. The woman he loved was at an airport, possibly about to flee the country with a con man and the ruins of their life savings, and his estranged brother was now racing with him against a clock of their own making to intercept her. The quiet dinner confrontation was gone. Now they were hunting, and the prey was the center of Robert's entire world. The airport was a cathedral of transience, a river of people flowing toward escapes and reunions. Robert saw Michael first, standing rigid by a pillar outside the international departures drop-off, his eyes scanning the crowd with a banker's cold assessment. He looked like a man who had crossed a line and was now measuring the distance back. Robert pulled his car to the curb, hazards flashing. Michael was at the window before the engines stopped. Leave it, we're on the clock. He pointed toward the terminal doors, her phone stationary near gate B22, Mexico City flight boards in 40 minutes. They moved through the automatic doors, swept into the current of rolling suitcases and anxious goodbyes. Robert's eyes darted, searching for Claire's familiar auburn hair, the cut of her blue coat. He saw neither. What's the play? Robert asked, his voice tight. We find her, we talk. We get her away from here and somewhere quiet. If Thorn is here, we do not engage. We call airport security and let them handle it. Our goal is Claire, only Claire. They reached the security checkpoint for the B gates. Beyond the TSA line, they could see the crowded seating area. Michael stopped, pulling Robert slightly aside. Look, don't run, be calm. And there she was, alone, sitting on a row of connected chairs, a single carry-on bag at her feet. She wasn't looking at the boarding screens. She was staring at her hands, folded in her lap. She looked small and unbearably sad. There was no sign of Marcus Thorn. The relief was immediate, and then instantly poisoned by confusion. Why was she alone? Where was the money? Where was the man who had orchestrated this? Okay, Michael breathed. Good, he's not here, that's good. You go, I'll stay back, watch the perimeter, get her to come with you, tell her anything, but get her out of this terminal. Robert nodded, a numbness settling over him. He walked forward, weaving through travelers, his eyes locked on his wife. He stopped 3 feet from her. Claire. Her head snapped up. The shock on her face was pure, unguarded. It melted into something else, dread, shame, and a profound exhaustion. Robert. Her voice was a dry leaf. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. Dinner with Sarah. She looked down at her hands again. The lie hung in the air between them, pathetic and transparent. I'm sorry, she whispered. We need to leave, Claire, now, before your flight, before anything else happens. I can't, she said, but there was no force behind it. Yes, you can. Get your bags, walk with me. We'll go home and we'll talk. Home, she repeated, and let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob. There is no home, Robert, not after this. We'll figure it out, but not here, please. He reached for her arm gently. She flinched, then allowed him to help her stand. She picked up her bag. It was light, too light for an international escape. They began walking back towards security against the flow of passengers. Robert caught Michael's eye across the hall. Michael gave a slight nod and fell in behind them at a distance. They exited the secure area, moving back into the main terminal bustle. Claire was compliant, silent, a sleepwalker. Robert guided her toward a quieter corridor leading to a bank of conference rooms. Michael caught up, falling into step beside them. Claire, Michael said, his tone neutral, professional. She looked at him, her eyes widening slightly. Michael, oh God. The presence of his brother seemed to collapse another layer of her composure. This was no longer a private marital sin, it was a family inquest. Michael pushed open the door to an empty, dimly lit business lounge. It was after hours, the room stale with recycled air. They entered, and Michael locked the door behind them. The three of them stood in the artificial twilight. Robert could hear the distant rumble of a jet taking off. "Where is Marcus Thorne?" Michael asked, cutting straight to the center. Claire's shoulders slumped. "Gone, he left yesterday, for Belize," he said. "And the money?" Robert asked, the question tearing from his throat. "The $380,000, Claire, where is it?" She turned her devastated eyes to him. "Most of it is with him, $225,000. He said it was for the facility, for my treatment program. The rest," she swallowed hard, "the rest is for my sister." The room went still. Robert felt the ground shift again. "Your sister, Denise?" "Claire, Denise died 15 years ago. She died in the car accident." Claire shook her head slowly, a tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. "She didn't die, Robert. She survived, with a traumatic brain injury. She's been in a long-term care facility in Phoenix all this time. My parents, they put her there. They told everyone she died to protect her, to protect the family from the shame, from the questions. They paid for it with their life insurance. But the money, it ran out 6 months ago." The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. Robert's mind reeled, trying to reassemble the past. The closed casket funeral, Claire's mother's nervous breakdown, the way the subject of Denise had become a locked room in their family history. It had all been a lie, a massive, devastating lie. "And you knew," Robert whispered, "all this time?" "My mother told me on her deathbed," Claire said, her voice breaking. 2 years ago, she made me promise to keep paying for Denise's care, to keep the secret. She said it was what Denise would have wanted, to be remembered as she was, not as she is now. The facility costs $22,000 a month, Robert. I've been draining our savings, selling things, taking out small personal loans. I've been drowning for 2 years. And then 6 months ago, they said they'd have to discharge her. There's no public facility that can handle her needs. She would have ended up in a state ward." "So you found Marcus Thorne," Michael stated, connecting the wires. "I was searching online for financial help, for grants for traumatic brain injury care," Claire said, the words pouring out now, a confession long damned. "He reached out to me. He said he was a patient advocate. He said he knew of a new cutting-edge treatment facility in Arizona that had a charitable fund for exactly my sister's situation. Serenity Springs. He said he could get her in, fully funded, but it required a show of commitment from the family. A large, upfront deposit to prove we were serious, which would be refunded by the charity after 90 days. He said it was a loophole in their system." "And you believed him," Robert said, the pieces clicking into a horrific mosaic. Her secrecy, her distraction, the phantom pharmacy charge for a gift card to pay for some online service Thorne recommended. "He had answers for everything," Claire wept. "He had documents, testimonials. He knew things about Denise's condition only family would know. He made me feel like I finally had a way to save her, to finally do right by her after abandoning her to that lie for 15 years. He said the bank loan was just a formality, a bridge, that the charity repayment would cover it before you ever saw a statement. He coached me through every step, the library, the scans, the transfers. He made it sound like bureaucratic paperwork, not a crime, a necessary shortcut to save my sister." The lounge was silent except for Claire's quiet weeping. Robert understood now. This wasn't greed. It was love, weaponized. It was a lifetime of guilt, expertly mined by a predator. She wasn't a master criminal, she was the perfect mark. Michael let out a long, slow breath. "The money he took, is any of it recoverable?" Claire shook her head. "He said it was wired to the facility. I called Serenity Springs this morning. They have no record of a Denise Vance or of any charitable fund. They said Marcus Thorne hasn't worked there in over 2 years. That's when I knew I had ruined everything for nothing." She looked at Robert, her eyes pleading. "I was going to Mexico because I couldn't face you. I was going to disappear. I thought it would be easier for you if I was just gone. You could claim you were a victim too. You could maybe keep the house." Robert felt his anger dissolve, replaced by a vast, aching sorrow for Claire, for her sister, for the decades of deception that had culminated in this disaster. Michael's phone buzzed. He looked at it, his face hardening. "It's my office. The automated system just sent a priority alert. My delay on the suspicious activity report has been flagged by the system's oversight protocol. I have to call in now or it escalates to my boss and the legal department. we are out of time. What does that mean? Robert asked. It means, Michael said, his voice grim, that in about 10 minutes the official fraud investigation begins at First Mercantile. They will freeze all your accounts. They will contact you for an interview, and they will, with 100% certainty, refer the case to the FBI. Claire's story, even if we believe it, and I do, doesn't change the forensic facts. She committed federal bank fraud. The why is for a judge. The what is for a prosecutor. Claire made a small, choked sound of terror. There's got to be something, Robert said, desperation rising. You're a senior vice president, can't you? I can't stop it, Robert. Michael's composure cracked, revealing the strain beneath. I've already bent every rule I have. If I try to break this one, they'll not only fire me, they'll prosecute me for obstruction. I will lose my license, my career, and possibly my freedom. Do you understand? The machine has started. I can't reach in and pull the gears out. The three of them stood in the stale air, trapped. The legal machinery was now in motion, and it would grind toward them with impersonal, terrible force. Then Michael's eyes narrowed, focusing on Claire. The money you said was for your sister, the rest of it, not the $225 with Thorn, where is it? It's in an account, Claire said, under my name, at Liberty Savings, $155,000. It was supposed to be for Denise's incidental care for when she moved to the new facility. Michael began packing, a man thinking 3 moves ahead on a burning chessboard. $155,000, that's 41% of the total loan. If that money is voluntarily returned to First Mercantile before the formal investigation is opened, it changes the character of the case. Significantly, it moves it from theft with intent to defraud toward financial misappropriation with partial restitution. The loss to the bank is massively reduced. Their incentive to push for maximum charges plummets. But the crime is still the crime, Robert said. Yes, Michael agreed, but the sentencing guidelines are different. The prosecutor's willingness to deal is different, especially if we can provide a compelling narrative of coercion and exploitation by a third party, a predator who is now a fugitive with the bulk of the funds. Claire becomes a victim who made terrible choices, not a principal perpetrator. He stopped packing and looked at them both. Here is the choice. Right now, Claire wires that $155,000 back to First Mercantile, tonight. Then when the bank investigator calls me in an hour, I can report that the victim, you, Robert, has made contact and is cooperating, and that a substantial portion of the funds has been unexpectedly recovered. That will slow them down. It will give us a day, maybe 2, to get a lawyer and build a strategy before the FBI gets the referral. And if we do, Robert asked. Then the story is simple. Spouse forges signature, steals $380,000, attempts to flee the country. The FBI will be at your door by tomorrow afternoon. Claire will be arrested, charged with multiple felonies, and the chance for any kind of deal evaporates. Claire looked at Robert, her eyes hollow. It's your money too, Robert. It's your house. It's your decision. Robert looked at his wife, broken by family secrets and a con man's lies. He looked at his brother, risking everything to navigate a path through the disaster. He thought of the silent house, the empty chair at the table, the future that now consisted of only the next few minutes. Do it, he said, his voice steady for the first time all night. Wire the money back, right now. Michael nodded, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. We need a computer, a secure connection, the airport business center. It's closed, but I have a membership. Come on. They moved as a unit now, a fractured alliance with a single desperate purpose. Michael led them to a different wing, used a keycard on a discreet door, and ushered them into a small private office with a computer. Claire, with shaking hands, logged into her Liberty Savings account. The balance glowed on the screen, $155,412.18. Initiate a wire transfer to the loan account at First Mercantile, Michael instructed, reading the account number from his own phone. Use the loan number as the reference. Do it now. Claire's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She took a deep, shuddering breath and began to type. The transaction, the final, tangible reversal of her catastrophic plan, took only 3 minutes. A confirmation screen appeared. The money was gone from her account, on its way back to the bank it had been stolen from. The three of them stared at the screen. It was done. A single defensive move in a game where they were already checkmated. Michael's phone rang again. He looked at the caller ID. "It's the head of internal security," he answered, his voice shifting seamlessly into the calm, authoritative tone of a senior officer. "Vance here? Yes, I saw the alert. I was just about to call in. We have a significant development on the Vance HELOC case. The victim husband made contact. It appears the wife was manipulated by a third-party fraudster posing as a financial advisor. The husband has just facilitated the voluntary return of a substantial portion of the funds. Yes, I have the wire confirmation. I recommend we hold the SAR for 24 hours while we verify this recovery and assess the true nature of the event. Understood. I'll compile a preliminary report for you by 8 a.m. He hung up. The room was silent. "Well," Robert asked. "We bought a day," Michael said. "One day. They're holding the formal report, but they want my preliminary findings by morning, which means we now have until sunrise to find a lawyer who can turn this tragedy into a legal argument that might keep Claire out of prison." He looked at his brother, then at his broken sister-in-law. "The crisis at the airport is over, but the real battle starts now, and we have to fight it from the one place we have the least power, the truth." The lawyer they found was named Anya Sharma, a former federal prosecutor who specialized in white-collar cases where the lines between perpetrator and victim were blurred. She met them at her office at 4 in the morning, coffee brewing, her sharp eyes missing nothing as Claire, through fresh tears, recounted the entire story again. The sister, the secret, the predator. Anya listened without interruption. When Claire finished, Anya turned to Michael. "Your preliminary report to the bank, does it mention Marcus Thorne by name?" "It does," Michael said. "I included the LLC account information I'd traced. I positioned it as a developing theory of third-party coercion." "Good," Anya said, making a note. "That plants the seed. Now we need to build the garden around it before the bank hands everything to the feds, which they will, probably by end of day tomorrow." For the next 14 hours they worked. Anya deployed a private investigator to Phoenix to verify Denise Vance's existence and condition, to get sworn affidavits from the care facility. She had Robert and Michael gather every scrap of evidence: the brochure, the budget calculations, the pharmacy receipt for the gift card. She helped Claire reconstruct her entire digital correspondence with Thorne, which had been conducted through an encrypted messaging app Claire had deleted in a panic. Using forensic software, Anya's tech specialist recovered most of it. The messages were a masterclass in manipulation. Thorne, posing as a compassionate advocate, slowly escalating the urgency, getting her around each moral and legal checkpoint with soothing, expert precision. By noon, Anya had a draft of what she called a preemptive mitigation package. It wasn't a legal defense yet. It was a story, a documented narrative of exploitation, anchored in verifiable facts, designed to land on the desk of the assistant U.S. attorney before they even decided to press charges. At 2 p.m., Michael's boss at First Mercantile called. The bank's legal department had reviewed the recovered funds and the preliminary report. They had decided to refer the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office, but with a cover memo highlighting the unusual mitigating circumstances and the active recovery of a significant portion of the assets. It was the best possible outcome from the bank. They were passing the hot potato, but they were wrapping it in a note that said, "Handle with care." Anya made the call herself to the AUSA, a woman named Carla Reyes. She requested a pre-charge meeting. To everyone's surprise, Reyes agreed. They were to meet at her office at 9 the next morning. That night, Robert and Claire did not go home. They stayed in a bland hotel room paid for by Michael. They didn't talk much. They sat on opposite beds, surrounded by the ghosts of her sister and his broken trust. At one point, Claire said, "I will understand if you can't forgive this. I will understand if you need to walk away." Robert looked at the woman he had loved for half his life, now a shattered mirror of guilt and fear. "I don't know what I need," he said honestly, "but walking away tonight isn't it." The meeting in the federal building was a study in sterile pressure. Carla Reyes was in her 40s, with a calm demeanor that felt more dangerous than any bluster. She had read Anya's package. She had the bank's file. She had Claire's entire digital footprint pulled by subpoena in the hours since the referral. "Ms. Vance," Reyes began, looking directly at Claire, "you committed bank fraud, you forged your husband's signature, you stole $380,000. The why is tragic, but it doesn't erase the what. My job is to prosecute the what." Anya leaned forward. "With respect, your job is to seek justice. Prosecuting a woman who was herself the victim of a targeted fraud, who has returned $155,000, and who is the sole lifeline for a severely disabled sister, is not justice. It's cruelty. Marcus Thorne is the predator. He's in Belize with $225,000 of bank money. Wouldn't the department's resources be better spent extraditing him?" Reyes steepled her fingers. "Perhaps, but he's out of reach. She is not. The law needs to be satisfied." She turned to Michael. "And you, Mr. Vance, your involvement is problematic. You accessed confidential bank data for personal reasons. You delayed a mandatory report. That's a breach of your fiduciary duty and potentially a crime itself." Michael didn't flinch. "I followed the evidence where it led, which is my job. The delay allowed for the recovery of $155,000 for the bank. I'd argue I fulfilled my duty to mitigate the bank's loss." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched Reyes' lips. She had them all in a box, and she knew it. Then she dropped the surprise. "The private investigator your lawyer hired," Reyes said, turning back to Anya, "the one in Phoenix, he discovered something your client apparently does not know." Everyone in the room froze. Robert felt Claire go rigid beside him. "Denise Vance," Reyes continued, reading from a note. "The sister, she passed away 4 days ago, pneumonia. The facility tried to contact the next of kin, your client, Mrs. Vance, but the phone number on file was disconnected. They sent a letter to an old address." The air was sucked from the room. Claire made a sound like she'd been punched. Her hand flew to her mouth, all of it. The secret, the guilt, the theft, the running, it had all been for a ghost. Her sister was already gone. Robert reached for her. His own grief for this woman he'd thought dead for 15 years now, colliding with a fresh, brutal wave of loss. Reyes watched them, her expression softening a fraction. "This doesn't change the legal elements," she said, her voice quieter, "but it changes the context of motive. The urgency was for nothing. The crime was for nothing. That," she said, "is something I can take to my boss." What happened next was a negotiation in the language of law and leverage. Anya Sharma was brilliant. She argued that Claire was now not only a victim of Thorne, but of catastrophic, compounding family trauma. Prosecuting her would serve no deterrent purpose. It would be a hollow, punitive spectacle. Carla Reyes proposed a deal. Claire would plead guilty to 1 count of wire fraud, a felony. In exchange, the government would recommend a sentence of 5 years of probation, with no prison time, contingent on her continued cooperation in the investigation and attempted recovery of funds from Marcus Thorne. She would also be responsible for full restitution of the remaining $225,000, though the government acknowledged her limited means. A lien would be placed on the house, to be satisfied upon its eventual sale or transfer. It was a brutal, lifelong anchor of debt and a felony record. It was also a miracle. No prison, no handcuffs in a public courtroom. Claire, through her tears, whispered, "Yes." There was one more condition. Reyes looked at Michael. "Your actions, while well-intentioned, violated policy. The bank's internal review will decide your fate, but this office will not pursue charges against you, contingent on your full cooperation. Consider it professional courtesy for a brother who got in over his head." The deal was struck. The papers were drawn. The machinery of federal justice, having loomed so large and terrifying, clicked into a smaller, manageable, yet permanent gear. 6 weeks later, Claire Vance stood before a federal judge and pleaded guilty. The judge, a stern man in his 60s, listened to the summary. He looked at Claire, at the packet detailing her sister's life and death, at the psychologist's report diagnosing her with complex PTSD. He accepted the plea agreement. The gavel fell. It was done. The aftermath was a quiet earthquake. Michael was formally reprimanded by First Mercantile Trust and suspended for 2 months without pay. He was not fired. The bank, it seemed, valued his instincts in recovering the funds more than it punished his procedural breaches. He returned to work, but the experience had changed him. The pragmatic shell had cracked, revealing the loyal, risk-taking brother underneath. Robert and Claire returned to their home, now shadowed by the lion and the silence where trust used to live. They began the slow, painful work of rebuilding. It wasn't about going back. That was impossible. It was about building something new on the broken ground. They started attending counseling, both together and separately. Claire began volunteering at a brain injury support network, channeling her guilt into purpose. And the brothers, the estrangement that had been bridged by crisis, needed a new foundation for peace. It started with small things: a text, a coffee, not about the case, but about a baseball game, a memory of their father that didn't hurt. The old arguments seemed trivial now, washed away by the flood of real catastrophe. One Saturday afternoon, 3 months after the sentencing, Robert was in his backyard, tending to a patch of earth where he decided to plant a garden. Michael showed up, unannounced, holding 2 coffees. They sat on the back steps, watching the late afternoon light. "I never thanked you," Robert said after a while. "Not properly. You saved her, you saved us." Michael shook his head. "I didn't save anyone. I just evened the odds a little. She saved herself by telling the truth. You saved her by listening to it." They sat in silence, a comfortable one this time. "The investigator," Robert asked, "the one who found out about Denise, did Reyes ever tell you, did he say if she was she okay, before she died?" Michael took a slow sip of his coffee. "I asked Anya to find out. The facility said she was nonverbal but responsive to music. She had a caregiver who was kind. She wasn't in pain. She was just gone a long time ago." Robert nodded, absorbing this small, sad mercy. "What about Thorne?" Robert asked. "The last trace was a money transfer from Belize to the Caymans. Then he vanished. He's a ghost. The $225,000 is gone with him." So that was it. A life-altering sum of money vanished into the ether, leaving only a debt behind. But as Robert looked at his brother, sitting beside him on the steps of the house he still owned, for now he understood the strange calculus of loss. They had lost a fortune. They had gained each other back. Claire had lost her sister twice and her sense of self, but she was free and she was trying. The ledger was impossible to balance. It just was. The forgiveness wasn't a moment. It was a direction, and they were all haltingly moving in it. Michael finished his coffee and stood up. "I should go." "Stay for dinner," Robert said, the invitation out of his mouth before he'd fully thought it. "Claire's making pasta. It's a thing she does on Saturdays now." Michael looked at him, then gave a slow, genuine smile, the first one Robert had seen in 15 years. "Yeah," he said. "Okay, I'd like that." Robert watched his brother walk back inside, the kitchen lights spilling out onto the deck. Inside was his wife, a felon and a survivor, and his brother, the once estranged ally. The future was a mountain of debt and a felony record, but it was a future. They had pulled it back from the brink, not through grand heroics, but through painful truth, imperfect loyalty, and the unlikely, relentless coincidence of a brother who happened to be sitting at the right desk when the forgery floated across his screen. Some stories are about winning. This one was about not losing everything. And sometimes that is the only victory you get, and it has to be enough. So where does that leave us? With a forged signature on a bank document, a deliberate act that, under the cold eye of the law, is indistinguishable from malice. Yet when you trace the ink back to its source, you find it wasn't drawn from a well of greed, but from a canyon of grief, family lies, and a predator's whispered promises. The law deals in actions. Life deals in reasons, and sometimes the two tell entirely different stories. Robert and Claire Vance are still married. They wake up in the same house, under the weight of a federal lien and a felony conviction. Their love is no longer a simple fact. It is a daily choice, a conscious rebuilding. Some days are quiet, some are hard. The ghost of Denise and the ghost of the trust that was broken are permanent residents, but they are building something new in the space that remains. Michael Vance still goes to work at First Mercantile Trust. The reprimand in his file is a reminder of the cost of crossing a line, even for the right reasons. but the estrangement that defined his relationship with his brother is over. It was incinerated in the crisis, and from the ashes, something more honest and more fragile has begun to grow. He shows up for Saturday pasta. They talk. They don't always agree, but they are present. And Marcus Thorne, he remains a ghost in the financial system, a data point in a fraud database, a warning that the most dangerous predators don't wear masks. They wear the trusted face of a helper, and they hunt for hearts already burdened with secrets. This story wasn't about a perfect justice. The villain got away with the money, the victim became a felon, the hero nearly lost his career. This story was about containment, about building a wall around a wildfire before it could burn down every life it touched. The victory was not in winning, but in surviving with enough pieces left to rebuild. It asks us an uncomfortable question. What secret, what fear, what hidden debt of love or guilt could push someone you trust to the edge of an unthinkable act? And if they fell, would you reach out to pull them back or step aside to let the consequences take them? There is no easy answer, only the choice that arrives in the darkest hour, illuminated by the cold light of a bank statement or the grainy image on a security screen. Forgery is a felony, but forgiveness is a lifeline. And sometimes, the most powerful force in the world isn't the law, but the stubborn, messy, imperfect decision to not let go. If you found yourself in this story, if it made you think or feel or remember, you're not alone. That's why we tell these tales, to make sense of the chaos, to see the human shape in the legal shadow. If you want more stories that dig into the real, raw, and complicated heart of family, trust, and the lines we cross, do us a solid, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. Thank you for listening, truly, until next time.